way, 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 way cheaper.
Any final responses on the mission?
I think we have to recognize that this is a social media tool, and it's been imposed on us, whether it is there. And again, the cost of implementing these versus the cost of other social media tools, and the lack of cost there is something we have to consider. I think the university should get out of the way.
Okay, thank you. I think we've heard enough on the first question. Moving to question 2, which is something pretty much all of you talked about in your opening statements. Do educational applications of social media tools engage students?
Sure. So first of all, I misunderstood what formal higher education meant, so I wore a tie.
For the School of Business.
And you know, it's hard enough to endure the slings and arrows I get from living in the neighborhood of Commercial Drive, where I'm called a douchebag at least once a week. And I figured if anyone, the scientists would appreciate the hard statistical data thrown your way. It's too bad you didn't bring any yourself. So I'll tell you, when it comes to engagement, how about I just tell a story instead? So you mentioned that Facebook is a distracting presence in your classroom. So I say flip it on its head. Use it as an engagement tool. The nice thing about doing a course on career development is Facebook is searched by nearly half of the recruiters out there. They want to see what how good people's privacy settings are and what kind of value they're adding to the interscape. So one of the great activities takes about 5, 10, 15 minutes, however you want to do it, is, okay, students, bring up your Facebook account. The two guys in the back go, great, I'm already on Facebook, awesome, right? So bring up their account, go find as much inappropriate stuff about your classmates as you possibly can. Okay? They go out, find it, great. Put it on this Google Doc, let's paste some pictures, let's put some content, let's discuss it. Is it inappropriate, is it not inappropriate? What would you say if you were going to hire this person? Pretty fantastic engagement tool if you ask me.
Very interesting take.
Well, if you actually look at it, social media are fabulous engagement tools, but they are not engagement in higher formal education. They are in informal education at best, meaning the minute you dive into a social media tool, anything you are doing is informal. It's not formal. I'm a huge advocate of informal education, but if we're talking about formal education, which is the guy in the suit standing up in front of the class talking, well, you're not going to engage students in that with social media. They're going to go and learn informally outside of that. So in answer to the question, this is yes, but it's engaging outside of formal.
I mean, if you look at the example that was given to us, he was teaching about Facebook, so of course Facebook was a useful tool. But I think social media suffers the same problem that games suffered in higher education, because that was a big movement a few years ago, where as soon as the subject matter becomes more formal, more academic, less interesting, no matter how engaging the tool itself is, people aren't going to go onto the tool to do that. If you've got Facebook with your course on the one hand, and you've got your friends on the other hand, and what you're going to be doing that night, you're going to be going to what you're going to be doing that night, as opposed to your academics. So they just serve a distractor rather than engagement.
I guess I question how you define formal education. So when I see the way educational applications are used, I look at, yes, there is the classroom, but there's also that broader community of which you are a part. And I think social media has been used really interestingly this year with, UBC Events now does this 1 minute across campus, just highlighting different events that are going on. Or there's, we do a pretty neat academic opportunity through Terry, which is TEDx Terry Talks, where students are able to present ideas and research. And people apply by submitting a YouTube video. And we have YouTube videos and video links for them to learn how to do that process and to see, look, it's not that hard. There's other examples of grad research information sessions and other things that people just see on the newsfeed and then kind of gravitate towards. So I think I think it's valuable in the classroom, and I kind of mentioned ASIC before, but I think that broader community of helping students figure out what it is they want to do, who they want to be, and what those classes are helping them to create is also part of formal education. I think it's really key there.
And I think it's interesting here that actually this debate is no longer about social media, this debate is about what we mean by education. And it's true, if education is about giving people grades, or if education is about, brand and job market effectiveness and so on, then really that's not something I'm particularly interested in. You know, I should go on and find another job. The question here is what kind of education we want, and then whether, you know, social media or different kinds of social media help us achieve that kind of education or don't.
Any final response in opposition on this question? So anyone? Okay, very good. We'll move on to question 3. How much time do we have left? Timekeeper?
About 15 minutes.
15 minutes, very nice. Okay, so this question is kind of veering off from the original topic a bit, but I think it's quite an interesting question. And that's, what is the impact of I can't say the word, anonymity? Anonymity. Being anonymous. What is the impact of being anonymous in participation on formal learning environments? So I'm not sure if it's necessarily a prop and op question, but it is a question that I would like to hear answers to. So do you guys have any responses to that?
It completely subverts it, which is a good thing. You know, but it's a difficult and dangerous thing, right? Because obviously formal education requires, you know, being able to locate and track named individuals and give them grades. Once you've got, you know, anonymous entities entering into the process, then it's difficult. Then, you know, you have to rethink again what you're doing.
Anyone else? Yes.
I'd like to tell you a story. And this is really just to illustrate the reality that anonymity, if you want to make use of it, is as available in the classroom as it can be on social media tools. A professor told me that he administered an exam in a very large lecture theatre to a very large class of science students, some hundreds of students. And at the end of the exam, he asked the students to stop writing, and everybody did except one. And he spoke to that student repeatedly while he collected all the papers in a stack, and the student continued to write, and continued to write, and continued to write. And eventually, the professor left the lecture hall with a stack of papers in his arms. And the student came running out after him with his exam paper and approached him and said, you know, here's my paper. And the prof said, I told you to stop writing. Yeah, I can't accept that now. And the student said, do you know my name? And the prof said, no. And he went, and stuck his paper in the stack. And I would like to suggest that just because you can see your students' faces in the classroom doesn't mean you know anything about them. If you want to make use of anonymity as a tool, it's right there for you.
Very nice. Smart kid, I guess. Any final comments on that on this point?
I think there's a benefit towards having spaces that are a lot more equitable and people can kind of just generate conversations. I think a lot of times in the classroom, you have the few voices that kind of raise your hands, and you have a dynamic that sort of develops over the semester of key people speaking and things like that. And when you have something like people, you know, a blog post or leaving comments about what concerns them in the class, or you have either clicker technology or whatever. Clicker technology is more of a yes or no question, but those open-ended things that people can really share and say, these are things I'm concerned with. I think that's why we like, you know, evaluation at the end of courses is an offline version where you kind of just share and it's fine. I think there's a benefit, and you see things with like, you know, Rate My Professor or just other tools where I think people crave connection but are scared. And anytime you can facilitate that, I think is really key. It just creates a more vibrant environment.
I mean, I don't think anonymity and social media actually go together at all. I mean, there's no point. You can't socialize if you don't exist. Even 4chan, you know, the biggest kind of where the anonymous internet user base gathers to do evil, they're not anonymous, they're pseudonymous. They have an identity that's not their real identity, so they can't contract, which is a good thing, but everybody kind of needs an identity when they're interacting with other people. So there needs to be some sort of identity, whether it's their real identity or not. Identity is necessary for social interaction to occur.
I think another important question around this one gets back to the business model of higher education, which is that learning occurs on a set subject for a set period of time with a set number of named students. And that's not how social media works. That's not how learning works overall. In fact, the way we have broadened the conversation beyond, you know, any particular class our friends, colleagues around the world, and so on, means that social media allows a conversation to occur inside a classroom with any number of people that nobody knows, even if they're not having a place, a real name or not. Therefore, again, the model of higher learning, which is closing the number of people that can engage in a conversation at a particular place at a particular time, is not relevant to the modern digital world.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're good on that topic. Before we get into the final question, which I think is my favorite question, I have a few questions for both teams just to continue to engage in the debate. So for side proposition, Leah and Andre both talked about how Facebook is the great distractor. How do you respond to kids and students in classrooms who are on Facebook, not doing their homework, who are writing their blogs rather than studying and their grades are dropping? How is that an effective measure of social media?
Make your lectures more interesting.
Okay. Any other responses?
I think acknowledge the reality of what's going on in the classroom. And I think, and so sorry to keep belaboring the point, but I think what happened with ASIC was really neat, where the two professors knew that I think the common dynamic of having like the classroom full of laptops, you, as a student, you know that the person beside you is like not necessarily engaged in the class. And I think acknowledging that at the front of saying, I'm teaching a class, but you're probably also doing other things, how can we kind of make them work, is a really neat concept, and I think kind of goes to the heart of why social media is effective, because it's not about sort of building different systems and seeing, trying to create engagement. It's seeing where is engagement already occurring, and is participating in that going to increase the outcomes that we hope our students will achieve as well. And so I was reading from the Telegraph yesterday about how Facebook is now used more than Google, and 5.5 hours is like the average amount of time people are spending in the US. And I think it's neat when you see people, making podcasts of classes or opening up software and just making that part of the learning experience, as opposed to saying, okay, how do we defeat it and how do we overcome the distraction and all of that stuff.
Exactly, and personalizing the student experience. So some students want to sit there in a room and listen at something broadcast or interact with a human being in a classroom. Others would rather stay at home and download podcasts, watch videos, can collaborate in online discussion forums, and having all these different options can be realized very effectively through social media.
Those arguments are great for specific situations where you have Essays 200, which is a class which everybody wants to get into and is exciting and fascinating, or making a class interesting. But if there's a class that just isn't interesting for the student, if I'm in a Physics 100 class right now, I'm forced to be there because my faculty requires it, I don't care about that class in any way, shape, or form. I'm interested in this stuff, in computer science. So there's no social media tool that is going to engage me in that class whatsoever.
But there is a way, I think, to share experience. So I think, like, with those awful courses, people have always...
no offense.
people have always aggregated, right? Like, I don't think it's a separate world. I think it's online, but it mirrors the same dynamics as your offline world. So people may be sticking things in the residence saying, oh my God, I'm in Physics 100, would you like to meet? Or they'll be creating groups saying, oh my God, I'm in Physics 100, would you like to meet? And so, and sometimes because we're already on Facebook, I might have that conversation more than I might have on WebCT of, will you form a study group with me? Or, I mean, I love Leap, and those form lead study groups as well. But sometimes if I have to go to a different site, it doesn't happen as much. So I think recognizing the pain and every class, it's a two-piece thing, right? The student has ownership to, if you're in a class, yes, be there. And to some extent, you will never make a class so interesting and use social media so much to overcome that. But on the other hand, I think there's a way to help students connect with one another so they can achieve and learn.
I just feel it makes me feel harder because I have people to not do the work with. Talk about how we don't want to do this together.
But that's not Facebook's problem, And in the end, like, some classes are boring, and like, not every class has to be interesting either. I don't see why. I mean, we're not running an entertainment show here, And in the end, and I'm not my student's mother or anything like that, I mean, they either, obviously, I try and show things that I think are interesting, and I'm interested in the topic and so on. But in the end, it's down to the students. And one of the interesting things, however, about social media and blogs and so on is you give different venues in different ways in which students can interact if they want. But if they don't want to interact, if they're not turned on by it, then really, that's not my fault and that's not my problem.
One piece that hasn't been brought up here with respect to social media active in classrooms comes more from the formal K-12 system, but really bleeds up to the post-secondary as well. And that's that teachers don't want these tools active in the classroom because it challenges their authority, particularly in K-12. I've heard this any number of times from K-12 teachers. The student will say, well, I just read on Facebook or on Google that what you're talking about is crap. This is the real answer. They hate that. They hate the notion that somebody's going to speak up in class and tell them something they didn't know which contradicts the knowledge they have, which is inevitable because knowledge is moving so quickly. And so the notion that social media tools challenge the authority part of traditional higher education, formal higher education, is absolutely true. That's why teachers hate it.
Okay, moving into the last question. First, just with raising hands from the audience, how many of you have Facebook? I'm just curious. Wow. Okay. Very good. So first, I just want yes or no from the CCB with this last question, and then we can talk about it a bit more. Do you have to accept your mother, son, daughter, or even professor's Facebook invitation? Yes. First, to say yes or no.
Do you have to?
Do you have to?
Do I have to say yes because I'm on the yes side? Or-
No. This is very like open.
No.
No.
No, you don't have to.
No.
Yes.
Really not.
No.
Okay, what do we think about when our moms add us on Facebook, when our professors add us on Facebook? Is that appropriate? Is that something that we should be worried about or something we should embrace and decide?
Well, it's interesting. My dad added me on Facebook yesterday, so I have this very recent experience. And I think it's a very interesting dynamic when you have that adding occurring. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think anyone who I'm letting into my network has to make sense. And if I was a professor or a parent or whatever, I would only add if there was a reason I wanted to talk to that person, right? And I think that goes back to the earlier point about social media is never blanketly good, and you shouldn't just do it because it seems to have this inherent amazingness to it. And so I would never mind a professor adding me if there was value, if there was something I was getting out of that in terms of you post really interesting articles, and that's awesome. If they were commenting on things that were really personal, maybe that would get a bit strange, but
Sorry to do that.
that's okay.
I mean, can I So a Facebook friend request is really a request to increase a personal connection. You know, it's some other way to interact with you. So denying somebody the request is basically saying, I do not want to have a relationship with you at a higher level. So if you're saying that to your professor or to your parents, what are you saying? I do not want you in my life. If part of being educated is forming a personal connection and really working together to solve problems, shutting that down is a problem. And of course, there are ways in Facebook to accept somebody and hide things that you don't want them to see. You do have that power, which is why you should be accepting them. Just hiding them.
Okay, last one on this question.
I just wanted to say social does not mean everybody. And in my actual life, there are people I don't talk to, and there are people I choose not to talk to, and there are people I share only specific parts of myself with. And frankly, social media tools don't have the sophisticated enough privacy characteristics to let me do that. Here.
Okay, thank you very much. Are we moving into closing statements or questions from the audience? Questions from the audience? Yeah.
5 minutes.
We have 5 minutes left.
5 minutes for questions.
Oh, 5 minutes. Okay, so you may raise your hand. You may ask a specific person. You may ask a team. You may ask me. Not sure why you would, but you can. Any questions from the audience about the topic we have discussed today thus far? Yes.
I would like to address both the teams. My question is, in your experience, your top performers, are they doing Facebook in their classrooms?
Good question. Who are the teachers here?
Yes, they are. But then most of my classes are online anyway. That's what they usually do.
Interesting point, actually, a recent survey of Canadian and American formal higher education institutions found that online students that took online classes outperformed those that just did face-to-face. So I'd say, yes, absolutely, the top performers in my class, even though I got shot down about how it's not a real class. Yeah. It happens all the time in career development. We're used to it.
And-
So yes, they do perform well, and they do use Facebook for sure.
Any no's? Any?
I perform worse when I sit in class and use Facebook.
I recently observed a calculus course, large class of 100 students taking an absolutely required course that they have to pass in order to proceed with their degree program. This is a course for students who come into UBC without enough math. The students who were sitting at the back of the class with their laptops open, not engaging, were the ones who were not participating in group problem solving, who couldn't actually hear, because I know they couldn't hear because I couldn't hear either because of the acoustics of the room. So I would estimate that there was a very strong correlation between students messing about on social media at the back and texting each other and the ones who were not engaging with the material and doing the work.
I mean, yeah, obviously, I suspect that's the case too. But again, that's not, Facebook's fault, I doubt those students would be doing that much better. They found another way to, you manage to distract yourself in courses that you're not interested in and you're not engaged with in many other ways, the problems of students doing badly is not a new one to the last, 5-10 years or whatever, however long Facebook's been around.
Okay, hopefully that answers your question. Next question? Yes.
I have a question regarding the comment about K-12 systems and questioning authority and such. And I was just wondering whether you feel that the fact that students are actively engaging the material outside the classroom and bringing forth new information and questioning dated pedagogy, I guess, of the educational system that is kind of rooted in, a top-down system, as we discussed earlier. Whether you feel that bringing this kind of information is beneficial to the educational experience, whether that's something we should embrace, and whether, in fact, that this higher educational system is something that is inherently flawed.
It's the word education is the key one there. I believe that form of outside, expansive social piece is fundamental to great learning. The question on the table, though, is what about education, which is the provision of an atmosphere for learning. And so all I'm saying is these social media tools are fabulous for students to learn, to broaden, to basically take control. But they're a real challenge for the top-down structure, both the system and the teachers and all the traditional ways of delivering education.
And this is from the perspective from the top, encountering these types of
That's right.
issues. Okay.
Most teachers in the world were still trained in an atmosphere of authoritative control of knowledge. That's where the world is coming from. It's very difficult for them to step aside and basically allow learning to happen as a runaway freight train that they're trying to guide.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful thing if you could learn how to do it. But very, very few teachers are comfortable with that, or institutions.
Thank you.
30 seconds each.
But it's neat in the sense that for students who often said, to go to Oxford and get ownership of your education and things like that, can then go onto Twitter, message world experts, and come back to class and say, hey, look, this person messaged me back. And I have a sibling in first year of communications and does this all the time, and then says, wow, anyone is reachable. I can bring today's ideas into my classroom and infuse a discussion with that. And so I've seen it in the sort of 90s generation, and it's working.
Very good.
But I mean, I've been in exactly that situation where I've said one thing and then someone has said, oh, but it says on the internet another thing, and I'm like, oh. And I've not always dealt with it very well, but actually that's one way in which you can engage people who are sitting at the back reading Facebook. You say, okay, can you Google this for me? So they're there with their laptop open and they're connected. It's like, okay, like you're bringing them into the class and into the discussion.
Interesting. Okay, we have time for one more question.
In the case of so-called free commercially produced or not-for-profit applications of social media, it's easy for the university to let people do their own thing. Is this an academic publishing medium versus whether the university provides it? Does that affect academic freedom? So I'm wondering if anybody has any comments on commercial applications or academically, institutionally hosted applications of social media and how they affect engagement, informal academic discourse and community with respect to academic freedom and commercialization.
Like if people were putting papers online, or
Well, if I publish on a social media site, what is that in terms of commercial, or is it free? Is it academic? Does the university own it? Does Facebook own it?
So,
Will I do it? Is really why would I or would I not choose to publish on a social media site?
so I think the question is really interesting, and it's something that the university has to engage with on a broad scale. But I think the important thing is to engage honestly in the debates or in the questions, rather than just saying it's not happening. So at the eStrategy Town Hall in June, there was a speaker who was talking about how so often we kind of say, let's build our own system, or let's engage in policy, but not understand that people may not be using it and may be using these like widely available like Google Docs or other social media tools. And so I think that's a question to sort of, that's something that, for example, formal institutions should allocate resources to exploring. Yes, social media, but how and when and why. And that's something that will require time and energy and training on that stuff.
I think there's a huge difference between a blog that's owned by, like attached specifically to a faculty's website or a faculty's wiki, different threads of conversations that are owned there, as opposed to a student blogger who's publishing academically relevant stuff, but their copyright is Creative Commons, and so it's owned by them, and all the things that go there are controlled by their copyright. So it's two distinct things. And that's a way that someone who wants to maintain academic independence, I guess, could function that way. And I think you get a truer, richer student story of their journey when it's something they're doing on their own, not affiliated with the academic institution.
My student blogs are all on commercial sites like Blogger or WordPress or something like that. I think that's a good thing. It's beyond UBC control. It doesn't have to be UBC branding, UBC place in mind, and all that kind of nonsense. My own blog is the same as well. I don't want to, I don't see any reason why, like it has that kind of nonsense, letterhead above it to make it seem like it's important. It's important because of what, the content that is written in it, not because of who I am.
Last comment?
I mean, there's a legal reason too, right? You can't force somebody to put something on Facebook where Facebook owns it. That's why we spend so much money replicating social media tools in-house, because of the legal and privacy issues around them. And I think it's a terrible thing that we have to do that. But at a point, we're just not allowed to put stuff in Facebook's hands that shouldn't belong there, according to the university.
Okay, thank you. I think this concludes the debate. Before the final question, I wanted to say thank you very much for having me. I hope to see you at next year's debate at this conference. It's been very fun for me. If you ever need a debater, wedding singer, master of ceremonies, you can call me Frankie. But no, on a serious note, it's been very riveting, very fun. Thank you, you three. Thank you, you three. It's time to vote. Good job.
So what we'd like to do now is repose the question, now that you've listened to the arguments, been involved in the great discussion. So we'll put the question back up. Please vote again. While we're doing that, is Emily here? Emily's gone. I just wondered if we got the iPads for the winning team. Yeah, that's okay, we'll stop the voting there. So what we'd like to do is we'll show the first vote first, if that makes sense. So we'll just ask. Okay, so question 2. There we go. Question 1 to question 2. So we've managed to confuse more people. Should be the essence of a good debate, probably. All right, thank you very much. I know that we're trying to get back on track in terms of our timings. I hope you all enjoyed this event. It was a bit of a risk for us to take this, but I hope it was one that was enjoyable and that we'll see again at conferences. Thank you.